Magic reveals itself to those who remember where to look for it. This is Magic Hour, and I'm your host, Taylor Page. Welcome back to Magic Hour, everyone. I'm your host, Taylor Page.
And I'm your producer, Claire. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
I'm so thrilled to dive into our guest interview this week because it's such a great one. And I just totally made another soul sister friend in this interview. But first, I want to just talk about, I love to share my mediumship development with you guys. And a lot of you guys write in and say, like, when you talk about mediumship, I could listen forever. And it's my favorite episodes are the mediumship ones. So I had a cool thing happen in my mediumship circle and then mentorship. So I'm part of a mediumship circle of women that met at Arthur Findlay College the week that I was there. And we've been meeting for like almost a year now. And if you listen to episode 131 with Tiffany, the ghost talk, I say in that episode that when you're around other mediums, the energy can get heightened and things can happen. And it was so perfect because even in that episode, there was an orb that manifested and was clearly seen and felt by both of us and shows up in the video footage. And so I meet with all of these mediums every other week on Friday mornings, and we're all around the world. One of them is in Jordan. Two of them are in the UK. One of them is in New York. I'm here in LA. So we're all around the world. And I had a really interesting experience. So we sit in the power and then we start to see who's coming through as we're sitting in the power. And then we start to basically give a demonstration for our group and see who can take the messages. But this time when I tuned in, I had a mom and a grandma coming through and they were holding hands. And I was shown that the mom was for one person and the grandma was for the other person, but that they had the same message for both of their people. So they were coming in together. Basically, they were showing me all of the similarities between them. Like they both had difficult marriages. They both felt misunderstood. They both couldn't use their voice. They both had cancer. They both had XYZ. These two spirits were coming together in a way that were kind of playing off of each other, piggybacking off of each other's similarities so that they could be identified by both of their girls in the group that they needed to get messages to. And they were both talking about selling a house and moving. And I didn't even know this, but both of them were selling a house and moving. And so it was like very interesting how the message lined up. It was a really, really cool situation. And I've never been in a situation where I was speaking to two spirits at once consciously. Usually when you're in a mediumship reading, even if you feel multiple spirits step in, you usually have a primary contact. And in this case, I was like bouncing back and forth between two spirits, like piggybacking off of what they had in common. And so later that day, I had my mediumship mentorship. So sometimes Fridays are crazy because it's the same day I have my mediumship circle and my mentorship. And sometimes they fall on the same Fridays. And then I have mediumship readings in between. And I'm just like, woo, I'm living in the spirit world, baby. Scorpio vibes. So I went into my mediumship mentorship, which that's a mouthful. And I told my mentors about what happened and they were like, that's really interesting. And that can happen. And we've seen this before. And they're like, now we want you to do an exercise where you start to open up and you do the same thing for us, where two of our people in the spirit world with commonalities come through to you. And they're like, we want you to give a reading where you give all the commonalities, but then we want you to branch off and talk about the differences of both of them, round out that connection and talk about how they're different. So I was like, okay, I like this. This is a fun exercise and kind of like an advanced level homework that felt fun and like just challenging enough. So I start to tune in. And spirit was like, I'm going to do you one better. And three came in at the same time. It was an aunt, a grandma, and a mom. And they were like, we all had this, and started giving the list again of what they had in common, which was so interesting. And then I branched off and they were like severely different people. Like one was a nun, one was childless, one lived for her kids. They had a lot of differences that they highlighted, but it was so interesting to me when they were focused on the commonalities. And so later, as I was sitting in the power, my guides gave me this message, like the reason we're doing this for you is because of your podcast. We're teaching you how to give messages where multiple spirit people tack on information in a way that reaches more than just one person. And so as I'm sitting in the power and sitting with spirit for the last segment of the show, it's going in this way where it's like multiple spirits are layering their similarities on so that multiple people in the hummingbird community can understand the message. And I thought that was so beautiful that my guides are taking me a different direction for the way that I'm sharing my gifts, which isn't just in one-on-one sessions.
That is so cool and totally makes sense. I'm just always so wowed and awed by the way that we're supported. And I think, a lot of times as human beings, you can feel really like unsupported or just so lost at sea in this experience of, oh my God, this is such a challenging experience. Like, why is it happening? But I think that when we look at like the layer deeper, we're actually like super supported, and the challenge is there to actually support us and help us grow. And that you have chosen to step into this space and share your messages and do it in a way where you're trying to help as many people as possible. Because I know that's a limitation for you with your work. It's like there's only so many one-on-one sessions you can have at a time in a day. And there's so many more people who want to connect with you. And the podcast has been such a beautiful way to do that. And I just think that's just so gorgeous that they are finding a way to support you in that endeavor, and you are there to support them in their endeavor of connecting to their ancestors or relatives or loved ones and communicating the messages they need to get through.
I appreciate that so much. It's so true. And I'm being pulled back to my sitting with spirit in episode 132, the Halloween magic one, where basically the past loved one at the end is saying it's all a language of love. Like once a loved one, even if they're here, is at a nonverbal phase, you can really see that it's all a language of love, because even the look they give you, the touch they give you, the thought that they send you, that's a prerequisite for the language to come as they transition. And I think it's just beautiful. However, people can tap into that language of love, even if it's as literal as mediumship or not. It's like the spirit world is consistently speaking a language of love to us. And to that point, like we are all so supported. And sometimes if we're not speaking a language of love internally, it doesn't feel that way. But the more and more we do our inner work and are kind to ourselves, the more and more we can resonate with the language of love all around us in the universe, with our past loved ones, with our angels. But until we can give ourselves that language of love, it's really hard to believe that it exists outside of us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was something that Zoe touches on in the episode to come, how like all of those experiences are part of the human experience, the pain, the sadness, the joy, the love. It's all part of the love, and it's all part of this growth and adventure that is being human. Embracing those moments too, where maybe we can't find the self-love, and knowing that's also like part of this. And it's like a tool to then connect deeper into the self-love. I feel like when we lose it is the biggest invitation to find it again.
Absolutely. And that's just the constant duality of life. And we're going to touch on this in the episode too. So I'll introduce Zoe here in a second and get into that because it's such a juicy and magical and beautiful conversation. But we talk about it's just a constant constriction and then expansion, constriction and then expansion. You can't always be in expansion, because then there wouldn't be integration and death and rebirth and deeper reflection points or evolution. And you can't always be in constriction, because then there's no adventure or newness or excitement. It's a constant ebb and flow. And sometimes when we're in the constriction, we genuinely believe we'll be in the constriction forever. And we try to create the expansion and look outside of ourselves for the expansion and get the expansion to come and manufacture the expansion. But I think our job as humans is to fully surrender to whichever chapter we're in, the constriction or the expansion, because both serve equal importance on our path. And if we can surrender to exactly where we are, I think that's a big trick to connecting with our highest timeline in the most graceful way.
Exactly. Like she said something about releasing that expectation. And I know that can be such a hard duality of moving towards something we desire, but releasing the expectation of it showing up the way we desire. I really struggle with that. That's like a lifelong journey for me, because you do need that forward momentum, and you do need to have that dream or that goal or that vision and take steps towards it. And then you need to also be in release of like but let it show up however. And I think that is very challenging for me in all aspects of my life. And there can be a lot of pain then when things maybe don't take the path that you expect. And then also a beautiful moment of realization when things come into your life unexpectedly that are so in alignment with your goals and dreams, but came in a way that you couldn't have manufactured. And I always point to those moments, like my best friend and I never could have planned. Our relationship came out of a loss. Like we both ended really important relationships and we're both like adrift. And I never would have planned for our life together, but it's been like the biggest gift of my life. So I think understanding and surrendering to the gifts that are out of sight, but will show up in ways we can't even imagine.
Absolutely. That's so beautifully said. And I think to that end, maybe creating goals more from a place of what we want it to feel like rather than what we want it to look like can help us shift out of the ego story and the strategy and the overthinking and the control. It's kind of like what our guides and angels were saying in an earlier episode about setting goals from a heart-led place instead of a head-led place. And when it's the head-led place, it's very easy to feel lost or it's not coming through the exact way we want to. But when it's a heart-led place and led by how we want to feel or how we want to create or how we want to flow, I think that might set us up for more ease on the path and less tension. But there's always going to be periods of tension and periods of ease. So it's just how we navigate it, how we create sacred containers, and how we're compassionate for ourselves through those constrictions and expansions. So I'm so excited to announce our guest today. Zoey Greco is an intuitive empath and spiritual coach who uses her gifts of clairvoyance, healing, and empowerment to help individuals step into their purpose, gain clarity on their lives, and find fulfillment and abundance in all forms. Through the Mystic Rebel podcast, her intuition activation mentorship, and through her twice sold out Mystic Rebel Oracle and Crystal decks, Zoey helps others experience healing, discover community, and feel far less alone in their spiritual and personal journeys. She teaches others that we all have the power of intuition and can develop it with the use of many spiritual tools and modalities to manifest a life of endless possibilities. Welcome, welcome, Zoey Greco. Zoey, welcome to Magic Hour. So happy to have you here today.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So we always start the podcast with asking our guests two questions. The first one is, what is your big three for astrology?
I'm an Aries sun, a Cancer rising, and a Sag moon, which I know we have in common.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I'm an Aries rising, Sag moon, Scorpio sun. So we're both water fire girlies. I love being a water fire girl, honestly.
Me too.
It's so interesting because so many people with podcasts have Sag moons. It's like such a common thing. And you've had your podcast for longer than me, so I'm sure you see the synchronicity with your guests too, if you ask them.
I feel like there are definitely key characteristics that you require in order to do this as a job. And I do think that the Sag moon qualities just really speak to those aspects. So I appreciate it. And I think it does. I think the Sag in me is my people person energy. And so I do think that is like a very useful energy to carry in podcasting.
Yes, absolutely. And I also find I love Aries women. I think Aries and Scorpio women just get along because we both have that ancient Mars rulership. The modern rulership is Pluto, but ancient astrologers were like, no, Mars, because they couldn't see Pluto. I just find that there's like a commonality there. And I vibe with Aries women a lot. And maybe it's because I'm an Aries rising, but I just like when people are bold and direct and go after what they want and march to the beat of their own drum. It's like all of the signs that are a little misunderstood, I vibe with.
I actually feel like a bit of a Scorpio whisperer because I find that a lot of the Scorpio women in my life I tend to have a different relationship with them than other people. And maybe it's the Cancer rising in me. And also with Aries, like we're fire on the outside, but we are baby on the inside. And I
Yes.
am like I literally am wearing a ring right now that says baby. Like I am baby. And I think I speak to the baby in Scorpio women because I feel like Scorpio women, you guys are very like, you remind me of Black Panthers, like very sexy and empowered. But on the inside, you're like, someone hold me and tell me it's going to be okay. And I feel like I can match that energy really well. And I just love like solid rot days with my Scorpio girlfriends where let's just get in bed and watch a show. You want it?
Yeah, I love that so much. And the other thing I notice with people with prominent Aries placements is that people often think we're a lot younger than we are. Like me as an Aries rising, and because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, it's like we have a young essence. We have a young vibe. And like people always tell me, like, you're so mature for your age. I'm like, I'm literally 34. And I don't think that you know that.
I used to teach a college class when I was in my 20s. And I used to have to tell people, I had this like bit I would do where I would say, I know I look like I'm 12 years old, but I'm a grown adult. And people always told me that I would appreciate that as I got older. And I was like, rah, 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 grumble. But now that I'm in my 30s, whenever someone cards me, I'm like, yes, thank you so much. I'm barely legal. Like I really revel in that energy.
Literally same. I'm like, you don't understand the gift you gave me. So thank you for guarding me. So relatable. And so the second question that I like to ask is, and this can probably be, as I say, for my professional intuitive guests, a whole podcast for you. So just say whatever comes to mind. How does your intuition speak to you?
I love this question. Thanks for asking it. I personally identify as primarily claircognizant and also clairsentient, clairempathetic. I feel everybody's feelings. I feel my own feelings. My license plate is literally crybaby. Like I wear it like a badge of honor.
That's so Cancer rising.
I know, it really is. And I honestly, like, I have fuzzy dice. I have little stuffed animals in the front of my car. I really am baby. But I do feel like that ability is one that is important to wear proudly because I think a lot of people are very afraid of their empathetic abilities. They feel like it's a burden. And so I really want to be an example to people to show you that it doesn't have to feel that way. It doesn't have to be that way. It's a huge, profound gift. So for instance, my husband is autistic. He's on the spectrum. And when we first got together, he had a very small EQ. His emotional intelligence was just not as developed. And by being together, we've really regulated each other into a space of really balanced emotional expression and intelligence. And I think it is a gift. It gives other people permission to feel like they can feel their feelings. But it's a little hard sometimes when you're so emotionally available and other people just can't meet you there. And until you understand it, it can be easy to take personally. I can understand why people feel that it's a burden, but I personally really enjoy having this conversation and talking about the fact that like clairsentience and clairempathy are not burdens. They are profound gifts. And I would say the same with claircognizance. I wear that really proudly because I think of the four primary clairs, it's the one that people just have the hardest time trusting or believing in, because if your body gives you a signal, that's like tactile, that's tangible. You can acknowledge that. If you have an auditory moment or, you know, you see angel numbers, orbs, like people really want to attach themselves to things that are tangible and literal. And with claircognizance, you're like, I don't know why I know that. I just know it. And you have to roll with that. And I think that is the most magical type of intuition of all. So those are definitely the way that I know that spirit speaks to me and the language of my intuition. But I feel really blessed to have had the opportunity to remain connected to my gifts my whole life. So I never had to rediscover them or regain them or reactivate them. I just had the opportunity to stay connected. So I do experience clairaudience and clairvoyance all the time, but I think primarily I just know stuff about you without you having to tell me. And I can feel all your feelings, even the ones that you don't feel yourself.
I relate to that so much because those are my two main clairs as well, feeling and knowing. And it's such a great combination, but it also takes so much trust because, like you said, you don't have the vision to hold on to or the word or a sentence to hold on to. You really have to trust your own knowing. And the way that intuitive senses come online is like in a flash. So I don't really experience feeling as a flash. Feeling is more drawn out and I can swim in those waters for a while, but the knowing is a flash, just like the seeing is the flash or a hearing is a flash. And it can even be in a moment where I'm not in a reading, but I'm just like looking at a news story or something. And then I just have a knowing. It just comes in so deeply. And claircognizance is one of the most advanced clairs, in my opinion, because of that reason, that you really have to trust yourself. And then, of course, as you continue to develop, your other clairs come online. But like feeling and knowing are really my top two as well. And there's so much I want to say about what you just said. The first is, it's so interesting to me, the point about never having to reactivate your gifts, because I'm in the camp that I think is very common of learning to fear them and get scared and turn off and then hit a rock bottom moment and then relearn them. I think that is like a classic journey. So can you speak to me a little bit about what your pathway was like? And did you ever have to move through any fear to come to this place?
I think you're absolutely right. My story is definitely less common. It's more unique. And it doesn't surprise me, though, that was my personal journey, because I'm a life path 9. So I'm not really here to like mess around and like, I got stuff to do. And I also feel like even in the writing of my soul contract, I just would never have agreed to live in an environment that would cause me to diminish myself. And in life, my biggest wounds have been in spaces where I was unprotected and I was forced or encouraged to diminish myself. But at home, I had the absolute blessing of a mother that was very in tune and connected to me as a person, like not even necessarily to spirituality. She's very open. She's very open spiritually. And I would say shares a lot of my innate and inherent like visceral knowings about the universe. So I had that support system, but more than anything, as a very young child, I started talking about past lives. I talked about choosing my mother prior to life. She was really holding it together when like your 2-year-old is, I chose you from heaven. And she's like, cool, like scary. And she really held it together for me. And then as I got older, and she would see me like talking to ghosts or wanting to make potions, or I only ever wanted to play witch and take my oracle cards to sleepovers. She really prioritized finding spiritual support for me so that I could learn about my abilities. So from a very young age, I was frequenting like psychic fairs and working with practitioners and experiencing all sorts of things. Like I remember going to a crystal bowl. It wasn't exactly a sound healing as you would call it today, but it was an impromptu round sound bath sort of thing. And that was when I was probably 7 years old, and I'm just a year younger than you are. I remember seeing these tools and these things long before they became mainstream. So I think in a lot of ways, not only were my gifts encouraged and supported, and my dad is basically an atheist. And so he was like, whatever you think is true, like good for you, like no one was obstructing my path. And then not only that, but I grew up feeling like those things were normal. So like I was in a sound healing band for the last 5 years, and we recently just parted ways to work on different creative efforts. But even when I was doing that, people would be like, what do you do? And I was like, I'm a sound healing musician. And they're like, what's that? And it always continues to surprise me and shock me when I come upon people that are like, what are you talking about? So I think even though I experienced that all through my life, it still surprises me because I'm so immersed in a spiritual community and a spiritual practice. But at the same time, it gave me such good practice at being like, oh, you don't agree with me? No problem. That's okay. I don't need you to agree with me in order to feel validated or clear or certain in my beliefs. And so actually, when I met my husband, he was an active Mormon in the Mormon church. And people were like, what are you guys doing? And because of my upbringing, I also had that perspective, like you can be from a different religion, you can be from a different belief system, you can exist in this world however you want to. And as long as our values align, or like we're both focused on growth and expansion and evolution and growing together, I don't see why that should keep us apart. So I feel like it really set me up very well for this career in this life because A, I don't need to be understood. B, I don't need to be validated. And C, I can hold a lot of space for other people who don't necessarily hold my beliefs, and it doesn't make me feel shaky or uncertain in my experience. Long answer to your question.
No, I love this answer. And there's so much hope for future generations of consciousness as you are an example of that, which is so Aries, like leading the way of a new example of consciousness. But I think it's also interesting because your inner child learned that it was safe to be spiritually in your power and in your truth, and that was supported. So it doesn't feel dysregulating to you if people disagree, like it does to other people with different backgrounds. And I speak to this idea of the modern witch's journey. And the very first step is the wild witchling of childhood, how we come in and we're awake. And just like you're saying, we want to make potions. And I actually did the same exact thing when I was 2 years old. I told my mom, I chose you. I wasn't sure about dad, but I knew it was you. And my mom was like very spiritual as well. And she was open to all of this. And even with that background, I still got scared and closed up. And so it's like, very ingrained on a societal level to fear these things as well, even if you come from supportive parents. And so after the wild witchling of childhood basically comes the forgetting, when the like societal messages, ancestral programming, fear all starts to, we come from source and then we start to slowly forget. And then we can go through an optional phase called the outsourcing of power, where we look for our power everywhere except inside of ourselves. And then we basically hear what's called the call, which is a term coined by Lisa Lister, who is a witch that I love. And the call is like a hunger for knowledge, a call that there's something more, that there's more to your life, that you're here for more. And then basically comes the remembering. And then finally, the wise one. And the wise one, it's not a line like a masculine structure, it's a circle. And basically, it's all these circles create little Venn diagrams in a way that makes it like a flower. And what I love is that the wild witchling of childhood is right next to the wise one, and they can learn from each other. And so it's like this beautiful circle. And what's so interesting about your modern witch's journey is that you never went through the forgetting or the outsourcing of power. You stayed in that consciousness of the wild witchling of childhood into the remembering and like that exploration into the wise one. And what's so beautiful about that to me is that it's an example for the evolution of consciousness. It's an example for what all of these cycle breakers, and our community is called the hummingbird community, what all of these hummingbirds, like the work that they're doing, the reclamation, like I have chills talking about this because you're an example of what their children and the next generation could look like if the gifts are encouraged and language is given to it and they're put into environments where they can explore and be with other people. It's like that just saved so much of a difficult journey. And then imagine how consciousness can explore and expand from there when it's been devoted to since childhood. So I think that's so beautiful.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for that. That is such a beautiful reflection. And I'm having a lot of claircognizant moments about us. So I think we need to have a conversation after this conversation. But I have so much immense gratitude for the way that space was held for my spiritual self, because my life did look a lot like other people's in a lot of ways. I suffered the majority of my deep trauma between the ages of 9 and 14, and then spent basically from 14 to 24 in what I can only refer to as darkness, like just so much pain. And it wasn't until between about 24 years old that I started to slowly take that off. And even in just the last 3 years, I feel like I've been on a huge journey of remembering who I am, because I think there's multiple layers to that. Like just because you're connected to your abilities doesn't necessarily mean that you know exactly how to use those abilities or where to use those abilities or how they can serve you as an individual. And I think I have the wounded healer that shows up in my astrology. And so I definitely spent a lot of time projecting my purpose onto my clients and to anyone who would listen to my messages of healing and wellness. And it was just a way for me to avoid doing my own personal work. And so I think in a lot of ways, there is still so much normalcy that I experienced in the human experience. But I feel a lot of gratitude that underneath that, I always had this thread of a sense of purpose, a sense of power. I've never separated myself from the belief that I can control my reality or that I can manifest my desires or that I am a part of this larger creative force. And I think even when you are in the darkness, that's that little match that gets lit that helps you just find your way through. until you get to that bigger opening of light and you can finally walk out of it. So it's definitely the buoy that held me up in my human experience. And I will say too, I went to college, I got a bachelor's degree. I studied gender and Asian culture, which, like, what did I think I was going to do with that? We're not sure. But I did try to walk a traditional path, and the universe was like, what are you doing? Get out of here. And I fought it. It was like this internal battle inside of myself. So there wasn't fear, but there was just like, well, can I exist in this world and do this work? Is it allowed? What does it look like? And being raised in an affluent family, I went to private boarding school. My parents spent the better part of $1 million on my education. And so to say to my family, thank you so much for that investment, I will now be abandoning all of that in favor of becoming a professional psychic. I luckily had support, and the only hesitance they felt was like a nervousness about, will I be able to survive in a world that doesn't necessarily support those endeavors or that work, or doesn't take me seriously. It was almost like just concern for my well-being in a world that wouldn't support me, but never a belief that I wasn't capable of being able to find fulfillment or success or whatever you want to call it. So I had my own grappling, but it wasn't necessarily with my gifts. It was almost like, yeah, I'm psychic. Like, we're all psychic. I still have to get a job and live in the human life, you know? And then the universe was like, not you. No, no, no. You have other things to do. And so it was pretty unavoidable. And I started my business at 22 years old. Like, I didn't even really have a grown-up job or career after college. I tried a little bit, and everything was just getting obstructed until I finally stood in this work. And that's the only place I've found peace. So I think there's also this sense for me that this was very predetermined, and any effort that I made to step out of it was just not going to happen. And I don't necessarily think it's the universe that was like, no, no, but more maybe so my higher self that was like, we have things to do. We're on the timeline. So if you could just get over this part and just move on, that way we're back on track. And I definitely feel on track. And I welcome that my journey is long, and I don't need to have everything that I want today in this moment at 33 years old. I'm excited for certain dreams to actualize when I'm 47, 56, 90. I look forward to that. And I think it's because of the road that I've already walked.
Yeah, I love that so much. And it's so interesting how, even though, like you said, the match was lit, it didn't absolve you of the human experience of figuring out the authenticity of who you are versus an ego story and navigating society and all of these things. And that's such an interesting reflection, because I think sometimes people can get motivated to tune in and tap in so that they can feel in control of life and think that it can absolve them of bad things or suffering or things like that. But your story is a beautiful example of how the human journey is still there, because these intuitive messages are not telling us exactly what to do. They're like guiding posts along the journey. And I relate to a lot of what you said as well about your parents spending a lot of money on your education. I went to private school my whole life as well. I went to a very prestigious prep school for college. And then I was like, I'm actually going to be an actress. Peace out. And I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be a comedy writer. And then now I'm an angelic intuitive and medium. And you know what? My parents have been really good sports. I mean, my mom was like my biggest fan when it came to anything. And then my dad was just kind of like, you know what? She has these phases and I'm just going to wait it out. But this was definitely not a phase. And I started my business at 26, found it relatively early as well, before my Saturn return too. So I really can understand that. And I'm actually 33 right now too. I turned 34 in 2 weeks. So,
I was
or like
say,
3 weeks.
You're a Scorpio, so your birthday is upon us.
Exactly. So we're both 33 as well, which is like a very significant age. I know. Yeah. And I definitely remember when I started this business, I was like hitting so many walls with my comedy writing. It was just not moving forward. And I just got this message: sell all of the furniture in your studio apartment and make it into a little reading room, and put on Facebook that you're going to do free readings for a whole year. And I was like terrified, because I was like, on Facebook, all of my prep school, prestigious, academic, think tank people are going to see what I'm doing and they're going to judge me, and the witch wound was in full force. And so, yeah, if you're out there and you feel a call to this, just know that the self-doubt is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing because it means you're about to break out of a comfort zone.
My favorite quote of all time is by Pema Chodron, and she says, "Fear is a natural reaction of moving closer to the truth." And that resonates. I know. So it hits me so deeply. And I think it's so important. I want to speak to something you said because I'm also a theater kid, singer, performer. We have more in common than I think we even know. But I think recently I've been coming to this awareness really deeply that I've been moving through this thing where everything is being dismantled and being recreated. And I'm learning a lot about like control and how I need to allow the universe to flow through me. And I'm having these like great revelations recently, but one of them that just came through so powerfully was I cannot help humans if I do not understand their experience. Like I must know my ego in order to support people in navigating their ego. Like how can you teach about something or preach about something that you yourself have never genuinely experienced? And so whenever my ego does pop up, I'm a person that preaches, and I don't know why I'm using that word so much, but I'm a person that teaches about practicing deep compassion toward your ego. I feel so bad for my ego because the rest of me is so incredibly optimistic and enthusiastic and excited and exists in so much self-confidence and self-belief. And my ego is just this Debbie Downer that always has to rain on the parade and ruin the party and show me what I'm afraid of. But that must be such an uncomfortable job. Like when everyone else is having a party and you have to sit on the sidelines and try and ruin it. What a lonely, miserable, it just makes me so sad to think of the ego that way. But I also think of my ego as the most powerful teacher within me, like potentially even more so than my higher self at times, because my ego is the one that says, here's what we're still afraid of. Here's what we're unsure about. Here's where you're feeling self-doubt. Here's where this fear of failure is showing up for you. Like without my ego being willing and brave enough to bring that to the surface. Like my ego is just the part of me that won't participate in toxic positivity, basically. It's the part that's like, excuse me, actually, you're really afraid of failure. Let's talk about it. I am so grateful to my ego. And so I used to experience these really intense ego attacks where I would just feel like, boom, like I was getting punched from every side. And I was like, whoa, this is a storm I do not know how to weather. And as I've grown up and as I've befriended my ego and held compassion for her and just held space for her and what she must do for me and held gratitude for what she does for me, we've really become partners. And now I recognize that whenever those attacks come up, I can sit in that and say, okay, well, just because I think these things doesn't make them true. And the fact that I think them, these are my limiting beliefs. My ego highlights the beliefs that are limiting me from progressing into what I genuinely desire. So I have so much gratitude for her. And without my relationship to ego, I A, couldn't progress as an individual, but B, couldn't genuinely and deeply relate and empathize with the human experience. And I'm also here to have a human experience. Just because I've decided to use it to help people doesn't mean that I'm somehow above or beyond the human experience. And in fact, I love being alive and I love being a human and I would like to come back and do it again. And I think there's so much beauty here that has yet to be born into reality. And I want to be a part of that too. So I'm really excited by the fullness of that journey and the part that the ego plays in it. And I would not skip over the human experience, even the darkness and the pain and the suffering, because we learn equally through joy and through suffering, in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with having compassion for your ego because that's true self-love. That's loving yourself for every single piece of yourself instead of thinking you're only worthy of your love showing up a certain way or thinking a certain way or expressing a certain way. And so true self-love is sitting with every part of yourself and showing it kindness and compassion. And that voice never goes away. Only our relationship with it changes. And I totally agree about it being here for us as a teacher. And what I say about it is that it's almost like a drill sergeant for consciousness. Like it's a coach. It's showing us like, okay, you've healed that. here's the next place to look. It will never stop. There will always be another comparison or fear or story of self that's outdated. There will always be something. But if you take that voice and realize I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, and you're the observer of them, and you don't take that as I'm actually not spiritual, I'm not progressed, my healing work isn't working, and you start to get down on yourself, just be the observer of that. And I think showing compassion, like compassionate curiosity, getting curious, like, okay, where is the earliest time I can remember having this thought about myself? And is there an ancestor who has a similar energetic pattern? Because as you are speaking about the ego and all of those stories and the way that the ego is here for us as a survival mechanism, I just saw all the parents and grandparents and great grandparents wearing a mask over their face, and then that mask being put on the face of their child, and then that mask being passed down. And I think there's also, like, with this visual, an element of stories within family lineages that get intertwined to the ego as well, and no longer needing that mask.
I don't know what I'm allowed to talk about on your show, but I recently got super high and texted my mom. And I was like, Mom, I want to tell you something. You broke the cycle. I love myself. And I felt like it was so important to vocalize that to her, because she was never given the tools or the resources to learn to love herself. She had to fight tooth and nail to figure that out. And I think she's still figuring that out. But she just knew inherently, like, she loved me so much and still does, that she knows I don't deserve to go through life feeling the way that she felt. And so she just did everything she could and everything she knew and everything she could figure out to teach me how to live differently and feel differently. And I really wanted her to know, yes, in some ways I'm the cycle breaker because I'm technically the first one to achieve it, but I couldn't have done it without her. She is the cycle breaker. I'm the first child on either side of my family to have never been hit in my life. Like, I've never had a hand laid on me in anything but love and kindness. And my parents both have done everything to treat me with kindness and softness and love and protection. And I think about my lineage with so much compassion. My grandmother was a twin that was given up for adoption, and her twin was kept. And I know that even just genetically as a woman, the egg that I existed in was actually in my grandmother. They say that genetically we're closer to our grandmothers than we are to our mothers. So I know that that's something that I've carried, and I have compassion for all of that. But I also think all the woundedness and the masks that I was handed to hold, kind of in the way that you're talking about it, are actually what has made me an empath and like such a highly sensitive person, because I experience all of those things that were handed to me, like through my lineage, as well as all the things that I've experienced in life. I always talk about building this like lexicon or like a Rolodex of empathetic information. So anytime I can tap into a feeling, I'm like, oh, this is shame. This is what shame feels like. And I like stick it in my little Rolodex. And then when I'm with a client, I feel a vibration and I'm like, oh, I know this one. It's shame. I felt this before, whether it's through me or through something I observed in media or something I learned through a client. Getting to work with clients long term, I think, is one of the most rewarding things ever, because I get to walk their journey vicariously through them and learn through their experience. And they give me the gift of holding the space to understand what they're going through, which is such a beautiful thing. They allow me to evolve even more widely than I would have been able to by myself. So I don't know how you could do that, either one of those things, examine your lineage or hold space for clients or hold space for friends or whatever, without that sense of compassion of like, everyone is genuinely doing the absolute best that they can. Like, I don't know anyone that's like, I'm just going to phone it in and just not give it my best. Like, we're all giving it the best that we can. And I really learned that from my mom. Like, she suffered some of the most horrible graphic abuse on every level that I could ever even imagine a human to have to go through. And she tells a story of when she was young, and I hope she doesn't mind that I'm telling this, but she tells a story of when she was young and her mother was beating her, and she looked up at her mom and just felt sad for her that she would want to hit her child. And I think that I inherited that compassion. And I do think it's so important when we find awareness around those things and when we break those cycles, when we can, to speak it out, to share it, whether it's a client we learn it through or a family member we learn it through. But I feel a lot of gratitude that my mother lived long enough for me to say to her, thank you so much, because I do love myself. Like, you did it. The thing you wanted to give me the most of anything, you did. And I have it at, 33 years old. rather than 68 like my mom.
That is so powerful and so beautiful and so amazing. I'm sure that was so healing for her to receive that text as well. And it's also very true. I've been in this professional space as a reader for 8 years now, and I'm so humbled and struck by the journeys of my clients and the resilience. And it's like people who seek out this kind of work are the cycle breakers, are the people who are self-aware, are the people remembering their own gifts. And I'm so humbled and awestruck by their journey and by their lessons. And there's no way as a long-term reader that you can sit with 3 clients a day for years and years and years and not be changed. It's like we're sitting in the presence of angels and spirit and ancestors all day, every day. And it mirrors to us, going back to that idea of the wounded healer. It's like, yeah, we have to keep expanding in our consciousness and our spiritual evolution to be a mirror for our clients as consciousness evolves on earth. And it's so interesting, even how sometimes like I'll have 3 clients in a row that have the same type of thing going on. And that's not an accident. They found me at this time for some way that it mirrors into my life as well. It's like the spirit world is so intelligent and layered in how they work. Nothing is arbitrary. And that is the classic archetype of Chiron, the wounded healer. It's like you have to heal yourself before you can help other people heal. And so it's such a humbling journey. It's such an inspiring journey. And there's always a deeper layer to descend into.
Couldn't have said it better myself, sister.
So I got an email saying that you would be open to giving me a reading on the podcast. Is this true indeed?
Can you imagine if I'm like, what? No. Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
It's definitely true. And I'm more than happy to do it. I would, of course, love your consent. And then also if there's any areas of focus, because there's definitely things that are just coming through that I'd love to share. But also if there's any area of focus that's resonating particularly for you, I would love to touch on that as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'm so excited because I work very differently and I don't like to do readings on podcasts. So I'm so excited that you're open to that. Let's see. Do you want to just say what you're getting off the bat and then we can go from there? Because nothing is like really jumping out to me. But then as we talk about it, I'm sure I'll get going.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I am going to pull out some cards if you don't mind. I love to use them. These are actually mine. I made them myself. So
what? Promote them. What are they? What are they called?
This is called the Mystic Rebel Oracle deck. She was born in 2017. She has a sister that's known as the Mystic Rebel Crystal deck. But I find that using a tool that I've created myself is like just 10 times more potent. So I always love to pull these out. But what I will say is one of the first things that I like to do in session, I tune into people's auras. So I find as a practitioner, this is a nice tip for anyone out there that is stepping into practitionership. Even though people pay me over $300 to have a conversation, they still come with skepticism, which I find so interesting. I'm always like, what? That's so interesting that you came here still like with all the skepticism. And I find that doing an aura reading for people right off the bat really creates this sense of rapport, and you've already shown them that you can do it kind of thing. And it just creates like this softness in the session. So it's been one of my favorite things to bring into session. And your aura, okay, first of all, I want you to know this is not the first thing on my calendar today. I've had a lot of stuff going on, and your energy has been with me all day long. You have been with me since this morning. I've been like, Miss Taylor, wait your turn. Your energy is so purple, but it's like a purpley white with lots of gold in it. And to me, that represents your very, very, very activated third eye, but also of all the people that I've worked with, and I'm not just saying this to be kind to you, I'm actually really obsessed with you. I'm like pretty into your energy. You have all of this white in your field, and that is the crown. The crown is so activated in you. You exist in this work with so much humility. You're not here to like make a name. It's just happening. It's happening to you because you're genuine and your desire to be of service is so deep and innate. And there's also a ton of angelic energy around you. Like I tend to work with the angels are my first and foremost. Like they've been my day one since day one. But I tend to work with like other energies as well. There's so much angelic energy around you, as well as familial and ancestor energy, a lot of family guardian energy, feminine family guardian energy, a lot of touching your hair, touching your shoulders, like touching your head. And your crown chakra is like this sacred portal that you came into this world with that thing wide open. And even though life has done its thing and you've navigated that with so much beauty and grace and poise in the way that only you could, it has really remained open, and you're very, very activated from the heart up. Like the heart up is just all of this energy. And it feels like at times you've had to really find support to get those lower areas activated and find the groundedness, find the pragmatism or like the order to things, because you're really here to like be a dreamer. You're really here to be creative, to be a visionary, to be empowered and be empowering. But the thing that I think I like the most about your energy is the generosity that you exist in. Like your energy is extremely generous. Like you're not here to gatekeep. You like all you want to do is remove the obstacles, and you're willing to walk the path first, which could be that Aries rising in you. That is just like, don't worry guys, I got it. And I see you with your machete, like clearing the path ahead. And you used a word earlier that I think is really important, which is curiosity. You used the word curiosity, and I could even hear it as you were talking about it. Like your relationship to curiosity is extremely important because it separates you from expectation, and expectations are what become obstructive to miracles. Like when we attach ourselves so deeply to an expectation, it removes possibility, and you're really open to possibility. And that's the thing that I think is so interesting about you. And I think part of what resonates really strongly between the two of us, we came here to do things, but I think what we're really both here to do, frankly, is do what is asked of us, or like what we find as necessary in a given moment. It's like, well, what am I being called to do now? You're very flexible. You're willing to evolve. The thing that I think is really interesting is there are some spaces showing up a little bit, like a little bit of spots of yellow in your field, letting us know that sometimes confidence is an issue. When doors get closed, it's hard for you. And that's okay because you're very, very open. So of course, when something closes, it's contrary to your energy, and your nature is like, I'm open, I'm here, I want to create and do and be and connect. And so whenever you reach your hand out and it's not returned, it's this like wounding moment or this wounding experience. And I say that with the utmost respect and a lot of resonance with that as well. But you've learned how to navigate that really, really strongly. And Spirit wants you to know that that's a practice that they've been putting you through, because you have some pretty big assignments coming up in the following 3 years. Definitely lots of blue showing up in your field. So this could be writing, this could be speaking, this could be getting on stages, this could be facilitating, teaching, retreats. I think it's probably all of the above. And one of the things that I think is really interesting as well is that there is a lot of green energy that is really seeking and desiring in the direction of like family and creating your own familial experience and kind of like cultivating that. Like motherhood is definitely like a very important stepping stone on your path. It's one that you're like holding very intently. So I don't know if you're already a mother or something you're planning on becoming, but there's something like there's a really strong energy around motherhood and like pursuing that as one of the things that will open you up in new directions of understanding. It's like a journey that for you expands your consciousness, and each soul that you nurture in this world, whether they are your actual children or just the people that listen to you, really potently expands your consciousness. And I would say, to be honest, I experience you as still being in a phase of collection. I think there's a part of you that's like, I'm ready to put this out. And the universe is like, almost like there's deeper pieces of awareness that are going to like tie everything together into this beautiful bow. Whereas it seems like you've thought, oh, okay, actually, I've got this message. It's really clear. And the universe is just responding to you and saying, there's a little bit more to it. And I think that patience is going to be really going to pay off in a really big way. Like you're going to be so grateful that the doors that have shut for that reason. But one of the things that they're really encouraging you to sort of connect to right now is the idea that some of the visions that you're holding for yourself are not as broad as the visions that Spirit is holding for you. There are unseen blessings, unexpected blessings. And the thing that they are encouraging you to do is the thing that I know that you know how to do, which is trust your intuition, to allow yourself to pursue that path, even though you're not necessarily exactly sure about how specifically it's going to unfold. Like you have an idea and the universe is saying, no, no, no. And you're still being asked to walk down that path anyway with like faith and sort of certainty, like certitude that it's going to unfold in your favor. But I think the most interesting thing is you're actually being asked to let go a little bit, release and surrender. Like you're being asked to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, you don't know yet completely fully what is the highest outcome for you. It's like you have an idea of it, and Spirit's like, we want to give you something greater. So if you could just detach from holding on so tightly to what you believe must happen in favor of what will happen, that's really where they're trying to hold you right now. And one of the things they're showing me as well is that there is still knowledge building that we're doing right now. We're still studying. And I really resonate with you. You're learning through the experience of life. You're not being guided to go pick up a specific book or study a specific modality. That's not the realm in which you exist. You could pick up any book and be like, I already knew that. Like you already know those things. It's more about learning through the experience of humanity and really using that to cultivate. Here we go. Yeah. Using that to cultivate what comes next for you in this life. And right now, relationships are a huge, huge space of teaching and wisdom for you. And the relationship you're holding with yourself is so sacred and so important. And I have a lot of, I don't want to say hesitance, but I'm trepidatious about exactly how these messages are coming through, because I experience you as a very clear self-possessed person. And I also resonate with that energy. And even those of us that are like, I know myself, the universe is like, well, guess what? I know you better. And it's that amazing place where co-creation truly happens, and co-creation happens more expeditiously and more potently when we loosen our grip. And so Spirit's kind of inviting you into a season of loosening your grip and letting things flow to you rather than you reaching out to acquire them or make them happen, because there is a lot of ambitious energy in you, but again, not in a self-serving way, in a way of like, I know that I'm here to help. I know that I'm here to do something important. And I just want to make sure I do it because people need it. Like you see the need and you're ready to fill those spaces of need. And the universe is basically saying, there's still yet more for you to see about where you are needed and how you are needed. And as that becomes more clear, your journey becomes even smoother and even more fulfilling. And it is greater than what you expect it to be. So by releasing those expectations, it flourishes into a fullness that is beyond even your perception or like belief, which is hard to believe because you have big visions for yourself. And the universe is like, it's going to be even bigger than that, which I think is really cool. So I know that's a lot. And I'm curious if there's any part of it, and you can speak honestly, like this is a safe space. If there's any part of it that didn't resonate or any part of it you want to speak to or speak around that we can connect around together.
It's resonated so deeply and I definitely want to get into it. And I'm just so grateful for that beautiful gift. Honestly, like it made me a little emotional when you were talking about my aura and my energy, because I'm usually the one reflecting that back to people. And for you to reflect that back to me was such a deep gift. It's going to make me emotional. I just felt very seen by you. And I'm very grateful for you sharing this. Like I have chills right now. And
me too.
And as you were speaking, I got the message that like what was coming through from me, like a lot of other people's spirit guides were tacking on multiple layers for the listeners as well. And so take what resonates with you, hummingbirds. Like the parts of the messages for me, it's like we're all part of the collective too. And I really feel like Zoey just, and you can tell by the way she was speaking, like, couldn't you hear how spirit was speaking through her? Like your voice got a little louder and more sure, and you had to say things quickly. That's the flow. No, I have full chills, and like purple, white, gold, that all resonates so deeply. Purple, my crown being extremely open, that's like the chakra point that I connect with angels with. Like I connect mediumship with past loved ones in my heart, but angels at like the top of my crown. And when I went to Arthur Findlay College to study mediumship, they always were like, you have one of the most open crowns I've like ever seen at the college.
So strong. I'm very used to seeing a lot of like purple, like open third eyes. And you were like, literally the top of your head is just a wide open circle, shining white light in and out of it. And I was like, whoa, this is honestly, I think channeling probably comes very easily and naturally to you. Your throat is also very open. Like I was saying, from heart up, you're like wide open. And I do also want to just say, I was also speaking to myself. Like that reading was at some points I was like, this is a little close to home. Like, what's this about? So I just want to say, yes, absolutely. It's for the collective. And I think that's one of the beautiful parts of the work that we do is like, we're just willing to have our human and spiritual experiences out loud in front of others. And I'm never really worried about my podcast numbers or whatever, because I know that exactly whoever is meant to hear it is there exactly when they need to hear it. And so every episode, I always say, this medicine is for you, because if you're there, it is. And I genuinely believe, just as you said, for anyone listening, that this was for all of us, including myself. And I just am very grateful that you were willing to be the subject or the focal point to allow those messages to come through, because it is a vulnerable experience. And this is your platform. And I was very mindful to make sure that I expressed whatever I was perceiving in a very loving way, because I genuinely see you as the big time. Like, you're a big deal. And I think when I come into contact with that energy, I'm always careful to hold it, because you are a sparkly star and people will want to like hitch themselves to you, or they'll want to hide from your light, or they'll want to cover it up because they can't stand the brightness of what you're holding and who you are. So I just want to really say, like, you're super brave for letting us do that. And thank you so much for letting me be a voice to share that with you.
Thank you. And right back at you. I mean, you're so powerful. You're so tapped in. I appreciate your gifts. And it was very brave to come on here and do that. And I just want to give a little more validation. Like when you were talking about the yellow and the self-doubt and a tough time with rejection, I don't claim to be perfect. I'm on my human journey. It's totally fine to talk about that. I talk about my struggles. I talk about going to therapy on the podcast all the time.
Me too.
I think it's that Sag moon. We can't not just be completely open and truthful. And yeah, I think I'm in this interesting moment. It's really interesting that you brought up the motherhood thing, because this has been what's really on my mind a lot. And I do have really big professional goals. And like you said, from a place of humility and service and genuinely just wanting to reach as many people as I can for help and awakening and shifting consciousness. So the motherhood thing was really interesting because I'm in this sort of pivotal moment. And when you were saying like, loosen the reins a little bit, like they have something bigger for you than you could plan. That's how this came to be. I was trying to plan something else and then they're like, okay, stop. And now I feel like there's always this constriction and contraction and then expansion. And I feel like I'm in this place right before the expansion where it's like, for the first time, I'm like, what do I create? And it's like, if you're asking that, then it's not flowing through you and it's your ego trying to be like, what's next? What's next? What's next? So I feel like being comfortable in the constriction means that you're leaning into a place where the expansion will come. And when you said that expectation is like the main blocker of miracles, that just hit on a full body level. And I mean, you said so many amazing things, but just what I can remember, I'm definitely going to re-listen to this. You also said that right now I'm learning a lot through relationships. And that is very true. My mom passed in 2021. And since then, the dynamics with all of my family have changed because in many ways she was the glue. And it's been a very intense journey of inner child healing, of exposing some shadows in the dynamics of my family, and like really coming home to myself and being my own sense of comfort when my mom was that for me for my whole life. So relationships are 100% like my homework assignment right now. We even spoke about this earlier in the podcast of how you grew up in a way that made you feel safe to disagree. And that wasn't the case for me. It felt very scary to disagree. And I know that the work that I'm doing right now on feeling safe to disagree is like a prerequisite for my motherhood journey and what's to come professionally as well.
You know, I had this, I'm going to be completely honest. I think some of my most like badass thoughts come through when I do have my little nighttime gummy. And I had this thought the other day because I'm a person who I can't avoid my authenticity. It's like something that just is a little loud. And I still, even as a loud, overt person, I still do my fair share of hiding. As someone with a platform and with a following and all sorts of things, I think sometimes I'm also scared to be disagreed with or to be misunderstood. And I had this awareness the other day that we are not, as humans, actually designed to seek or need the approval, acceptance, or agreement of others. And I think you and I have this in common, and I'm just going to speak it out because, like, why not? I think it's okay. I expect that my platform will only grow. Like, I have big visions for myself and I also have big visions for you. And I would love to think that our platforms could find each other and commingle. And we have to get used to voices of dissonance as we grow in ubiquity. As we grow in our presence, people will automatically respond to that with disagreement and dissonance because they're not ready for those messages. Like, we're speaking to a very specific audience, the people that are listening right now, like the people who will hear these words, like that is who we are working for and working with. And those who don't understand. But as sensitive people, it's not always easy to face that dissent and that negation, even when we understand that it's not personal. It's still hard. And so cultivating that gift and that skill of embracing disagreement, agreeing to disagree, and knowing that you're valid and you're allowed and you have permission to not need other people to agree with you or not to have to capitulate into agreement. It's going to serve you so potently on the path to, I don't want to say fame, because I think that's like a heavy word, but on the path to being more well-known. And as you grow professionally, it's just going to serve you. And I want you to know I'm speaking from like, we are walking the same path. This isn't me sitting above you saying, yeah, this is me going, sister, we're learning this lesson because I think we're about to hit the big times. Like, we're about to go into this phase of huge expansion. And I know that gift will serve us both. So we're practicing it together. And I'm just really happy to be here with you and to make this connection. And this feels like probably one of my favorite interviews I've ever done.
Oh my gosh, I just have full chills the whole time talking, and I'm so happy that you're here too. And it's so interesting how many synchronicities there are between our paths. And it's funny because as a reader myself, like, I even start with energetic scans. I don't do the whole aura thing, but just like you said, I soften them up and I see what I'm initially getting. And so I completely understand. And I also understand why you said, I'm not coming from a place where I'm above you or anything like that, but nothing in your energy, tone, delivery, or message gave that. So don't worry about that.
My thing is also humility. So I'm always like, we're on this journey together. Like, I'm here for you. I love you.
Yeah.
I'm very focused on that. So thank you for reflecting that back to me, because that really means the world.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been so magical, and I know it's going to help the hummingbirds as well. And can you just tell everybody where they can find you? And side note, I wish you lived in California.
Well, good for you. I travel there frequently, so I can come and visit whenever you want. And I also have lots of space at my home here in Phoenix that's just waiting for you and your husband to come for a visit. And I think we should go for like a spa day. That's my thing. I love to just go for spa days.
I love a good spa day. And I'm married to a Taurus double Cancer who really loves spa days as well.
My Venus is in Taurus, so I'm always like, adorn me. So people can find me by visiting zoeygreco.com, ZOEYGRECO.com. And then you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at the Zoey Greco, because there's more than one, but I'm the Zoey Greco. And those are the spaces where you can find me. And if you want to work with me, I do intuitive development, mentorship. I'm really focused on helping people learn their intuitive language. And if you want to know your intuitive language, you can actually go to my website and take a quiz and find out which of the 4 primary psychic senses you possess most strongly. I'm here for whatever anyone needs on their journey. And I'm just honored to connect to you and your audience. And I believe this will be one of many conversations that we have, including getting you over on the next season of the Higher Self Hotline, which is also my podcast. I have a podcast called the Higher Self Hotline, where I share real client sessions and interviews with amazing people like you, as well as advice and meditations. So come on over and swim in my waters, people.
Oh my goodness. I would love to be a guest on your podcast. That
Let's
sounds
get you
amazing.
signed up, sister.
Okay. To be continued and more to come. So thank you so much for being here, Zoey.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit, my loves, the part of the podcast where, as the name suggests, I sit with spirit and give the messages from our angels, ancestors, and guides that want to be shared with the hummingbird community. As always, take what resonates with you, leave the rest. And if you know somebody who might benefit from this message, or you have a feeling it's for them, please share the podcast with them. It really helps, and you're being a little rainbow bridge for people in the spirit world. So it's much appreciated. So as always, I'm going to start with the messages from our angels. And it's interesting because the energy right now feels like the duality is so turned up. We've been speaking a lot about duality in this podcast episode, and I love the synchronicities that come full circle with the Sitting with Spirit. But I felt 2 very real opposite ends of the spectrum happening at once. And it's almost like we're in a moment where it's like, pick your own fighter. Are you going to go down or are you going to swim up? Where's your consciousness going to go? Because with how extreme the polarities are right now, it's up to us. And so the first thing that I felt was this sense of optimism and hope and growth and magic and expansion. And as I was feeling this, I got the message, dare to dream big, dare to dream even bigger. But that part of this message is in the word dare, because the dreaming part, that's beautiful. And that vision is great to hold on to. But the daring part is the part where we then let go of the reins and leave room for something bigger than we could plan. And it's almost like a parallel to my mediumship journey, where in the beginning, my head came in a lot. And it still does sometimes, where I doubt myself, I doubt the message, I doubt what's coming through. But then through time and practice, I get to a place where I trust more. I surrender more. I don't have to have all the answers or the plan. I know Spirit's going to fill in the space with exactly what needs to be shared. And there's a similar feeling with our practice on our spiritual journey towards our dreams. It's like, can we get into the practice of recognizing that what we are trying to hold on to that isn't working, it's for the best, that it's not going to stick in our lives. And that is something that over time is proven to us over and over again. And when the thing that is right for us shows up, then we're like, thank goddess I didn't hold on with all of my might and fight for something that wanted to leave. And so they're really emphasizing the part of surrender, the part of release in the dare to dream bigger, because the daring part, like they're saying, is the part that is brave and vulnerable. And the bigger part is the spirit world, higher self-led path. So the dreaming is part of our co-creation, and then the letting the dream fill the space of something divinely guided and led. That's the part that is very brave, very daring, and very scary. And so there's a big acknowledgement here for the hummingbird community. Like, trust it, trust it, trust it, but then let go and let it fill the space and just keep following your heart, because it does feel like an up level time. It does feel like a time like where they really want to emphasize hope and not losing hope. And then I was seeing my symbol for ovaries. And when I see that as a symbol, it's talking about women. And as I was seeing this symbol, I felt a removal of energy from the throat chakra. And it feels like it's this moment where women's voices need to be heard, where women's voices need to be heard in a bigger way, and where there's something about part of the pendulum swinging back to female empowerment on a large scale is us sharing our voice, us amplifying each other's voices. And it's interesting because this connects with the person in Spirit's message. There's something here about no longer competing with each other like we used to in previous generations, but amplifying each other, being stronger together, and a need for that even more than ever. And with that, I was seeing this healing turquoise light. So turquoise light is this color of like higher divination, inspiration, intuition, spiritual connection. And turquoise is the color of Archangel Haniel. And Archangel Haniel comes to help us develop our intuition and help humanity ascend in consciousness. And I feel like there is something about this healing turquoise light that's breaking through the tension, the barriers, and the malfunction of thought. It feels like a lot of us go into these crown chakra block places where we go into these ruts and we can only see what isn't working, what we want more of, what we don't have, and we miss out on what is working, what's right in front of us, the magic here and now. And so I feel like tied into this expansion is like realizing that it's okay. We don't have to have it all figured out. I really liked what Zoe said about, yeah, we know ourselves, but the universe knows us better. And that's sort of the sentiment of this message. It's like, it's time to start filling in these gaps of unknown with more intuitive sessions, more sacred connection with your own angels and guides, more practices of gratitude, more reconnecting with your heart and your third eye and your intuition, and to really lean on that. Because as I said, the energy right now feels like it's two different realities superimposed on each other. And it's really easy for us to get into the heaviness of this moment, the intensity of this moment. But there's also so much joy and magic and light and expansion. It's like both sides are turning up the quote unquote choose your fighter metaphor. It's like both of them, the love and fear fighters, are like extra heightened and loud in our mind. And we have to actively feed the voice of love. And a part of that is letting go of the reins of control and letting ourselves fill a container that we don't have to have the perfect plan for. We just need to go step by step in the direction of our heart. As I'm recording this, I do feel hopeful. I do feel like it's this time where there's a call and an activation for the divine feminine and for women's voices and for sharing our light. It feels like a hopeful moment. It really is this message here of collective up level. It's like also a moment where, as Pluto is in the final degrees of Capricorn, it's like a graduation ceremony. Like we're all graduating into a new level of consciousness, whether you realize it or not. And it's been so focused on breaking ancestral cycles, healing inner child stuff, working within the confines of family structures. And then that goes to the macro scale. That's like the Capricorn Cancer axis. It's like Pluto in Capricorn is also pulling on Cancerian archetype since it's the sister sign. And so it's been such a graduation ceremony. And now in this moment, it's like what we've been holding on to in terms of our vision and our dream might have been created from a different version of self or a different consciousness. So let it shift, let it evolve, let it grow as you do, and don't hold on too strongly. I did have a female past loved one in spirit stepping through. She showed me that she had breast cancer and then it spread to her stomach. And this felt like an aunt on the mom side of the family. And I got an S name, like Shelly or Stacy, something like that. And I felt like there was distance, like physical distance and emotional distance, even though it seemed like she was cool and was a good person and things like that. It's just, it didn't feel like there was that closeness that sometimes sisters have, and in your case, an aunt would have. And then I also saw a connection to boats, being near the water, being on the water. I also saw blonde hair, and she was showing me that there is a history in the family of not talking about things, of there being a distance. And when things get hard or uncomfortable, it's like part of the pattern to just not talk about it, to distance, to move away, to live somewhere else. And she basically said it ends with you. And so I feel like there is this history with this person. And again, from the intros I was talking about, they piggyback off of each other. So take the messages that resonate with you. But there's something about no more sweeping things under the rug, no more disconnected, broken family living all over the world because it's too painful to come together and talk about difficult things. And another part of this is that I feel like the girls in the family, the women, were like pitted against each other, like always in competition, always feeling like there was only room for one favorite, and that there's always this sort of like ingrained sense of rivalry. And this circles back to that initial message about like ovaries, activation, divine feminine, supporting each other, amplifying each other's voices. I think it's also very synchronistic that Zoe and I had an instant connection of support and uplifting with this message on the heels of that interview. So I love how that all works together in symphony. And so this is saying this is really a call to end this cycle of deeply ingrained competition. There can only be one. It's me versus you. It's like we're coming into a new place of consciousness, and this is a big part of it, as well as not holding on to anger, not holding on to things that are painful and sweeping it under the rug. It's like everything needs to come out into the light so it's not living in our body and creating dis-ease. And I even felt that she was with a father figure in spirit, her father, and that he had dementia when he got to his later years. And it just feels like there's this long history of not wanting to remember on the energetic side of things, not wanting to remember, not wanting to think about it, not wanting to process what was uncomfortable. And so this is an invitation to anybody listening that resonates, that it ends with us. Supporting other women is actually a show of great confidence in yourself, because it says that you fully trust that you are good enough, that you are enough, and that there is enough in the world for you. And not supporting women is actually highlighting a greater wounded way of seeing ourselves. So that's the invitation here. And I feel like this Ant and Spirit from the other side, they're just in pure love on the other side. It's not like they're sitting there in regret. But I know from her human perspective, there's regret that they couldn't have been closer, that the family couldn't have come together, and that the dynamic was still very much rooted in patriarchy and the male gaze, and that we're in this moment now where we have to come together and stand unified and amplify each other's voices. And that is part of the recipe for this up-level moment and this magic and this expansion. Claire, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, I just absolutely loved all of those messages. It was definitely things I needed to hear myself. I'm really resonating with all those feelings of this moment being challenging and heavy. You and I talk about women supporting women a lot. And I had a teacher years ago who said, what if every room you walked into, you decided to have every woman's back in that room? And I just thought that was such a beautiful reframe. And, in Harry Potter, Luna tells Harry at one point, if it was me, I would want you to feel isolated because, Voldemort could take you down easier if you're all alone and you feel all alone. And I think that's something that women have historically felt like we're alone in this journey. And I think coming together with other women, supporting other women is such a beautiful thing that we can do for ourselves and each other. We're so much stronger together. And I just loved your reframe about hope. It's like in these heavy moments or in moments of letting go, it's so hard, but it is a moment of hope for something new to come in.
Absolutely. And like how supporting women is an expression of self-love, because as we're kinder to ourselves on the internal, we can be kinder to women in our lives, because, when you're unkind, it's just giving a peek behind the curtain of how you're speaking to yourself. And like this same comparison to the hope, it's like a display of strength to be attached to a vision, a dream, even just a direction or a feeling that you're calling into your life. And then having so much trust and faith in your capacity to be okay no matter what, that you can let go of the reins a little bit as the story keeps writing itself. Because it's so tempting to skip to the last chapter, but skipping to the last chapter isn't trusting the author or letting the journey unfold. So just continuing doing the best we can with where we are through this time of extremely heightened duality. There's always duality, but it's in our face more than ever. And it's up to us to cultivate our peace and our mindset and feed the voice of love more than ever. And we have to be a little bit more disciplined and structured with our attention and our consciousness at this time and on earth.
Yeah, I love that. It is a braver choice to feel hope than to decide that I'm not getting what I want or this is hard. It's like, even in the face of it being hard, deciding that I am going to have hope. Even what you said, like skipping to the end of the book, it's like, well, then you miss the journey of the book. And I don't think that's what any of us want. So thank you for those messages. I really needed to hear that.
Oh, I'm really glad. And I know that if you and I need to hear them, so do the hummingbirds, because we're literally all one. So that was another funny part of Zoe's reading. She was like, this is also for me. And I was like, it's also for the hummingbirds.
And
because,
for me.
And for you. And you're a hummingbird too. So I feel we're all connected. We're all on this journey together, and it manifests in slightly different ways. But when I'm doing sitting with spirit and I'm reading for literally thousands of people at the same time, it's like our angels and guides are distilling it down to the energetics and principles that can be applied to many different situations. So I'm glad that it resonates with you. I hope that it helps you hummingbirds out there. I know it's an intense time, but don't forget the hope. Don't forget the third eye awakening. Don't forget the invitation to display just how powerful you are by letting go of the reins a little bit.
I love that.
Yeah. So have a beautiful week, my love. So nice to connect with you again.
For more information on Taylor and her work, go to angelsandamethyst.com or connect with her on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. She is the one verified account with this name and will never DM you for a reading. If you have any questions about intuition, spirituality, angels, or anything and everything magical, please email contact@magichourpod.com. We will answer listener questions once a month in our solo episodes. Are you an aligned business owner that would like to advertise to our beautiful hummingbird community? Please email contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss the magic. And don't forget to leave us 5 sparkling star reviews. They help more magical people find the pod. Please screenshot and email your 5-star reviews to contact@magichourpod.com, and we will send you a free downloadable angelic meditation and enter you to win an angel reading with Taylor Page. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 166 5-star reviews.
Thank you for listening to Magic Hour with Taylor Page. Remember, you are magic.